We sometimes need to remember that Kawhi has won 2 titles in his career. And both times, Leonard was the NBA Finals MVP. The first time before he was an All-Star with the San Antonio Spurs. But we remember him the most for the title he won with the Toronto Raptors in 2018-19. It was a magical season that brought out the best in the brilliant player. But why? And would Kawhi's career have gone better if he had remained in Canada? The Raptors were a perfect spot for the sublime talents of Kawhi Leonard. The team made him the undisputed number 1 and surrounded him with excellent role players. Instead of trying to bring in superstars, the Raptors brought in players to make life easier for Leonard. For example, they traded for center Marc Gasol in the middle of the season. As an established presence in the paint, he allowed the team more freedom from behind the arc, and the Raptors went from averaging 34.5% behind the arc to 41%. They are the best in the league, but Marc averaged 9.1 points per game and was there to open up lanes and free up shooters, not to become the top option. But it was in the playoffs that Leonard really shined. He scored over 30 points in 11 games, and it wasn't always scoring that won games. For example, in the deciding Game 6 of the East Conference Finals, Leonard took down 17 rebounds alongside scoring 27 to beat Giannis and the Bucks. But Toronto has always needed help holding on to its superstars. From Damon Stoudemire to Vince Carter, the Raptors' finest always wanted out. Soon he was headed to the City of Angels. The Clippers persuaded Leonard that they were building a championship-caliber team. And, of course, he is from Moreno Valley, not far from Los Angeles, which helped sway the star. It was the first time an NBA Finals MVP had left in free agency. Los Angeles planned to build around Kawhi and Paul George, both newcomers to the team in 2019-20. But, as we know, things haven't gone according to plan for the Clippers. In 2019-20, they lost to the Nuggets in the Western Conference semifinals before losing to the Suns in the conference finals the following year. George and Kawhi have generally played well together, although there have been natural struggles for power, the kind of thing you would expect from 2 superstars of that caliber. But the main problem was, as we will discuss, injuries. In 4 seasons together, they have played only 142 games, with a record of 96-46. That is less than 40% of their games. Would things have been better if Kawhi stayed with the Raptors? The strongest argument for Leonard's tremendous success with Toronto is how well some players on the 2018-19 Raptors roster have developed since. The team has kept many of what was then its brightest young lights, and they have become imposing players. In particular, Fred VanVleet has become a dynamic scorer. The two worked well together during the title year when Fred scored 11 points per game. It is a mouth-watering prospect to imagine the two together now that VanVleet averages 20 points. Meanwhile, Pascal Siakam is improved by leaps and bounds, adding a repertoire of offensive moves to his impressive rebounding abilities. The Clippers have some incredible talent too. Most notably, of course, Paul George and now Russell Westbrook. But the Clippers' stars have never really figured out how to play together to maximal effect. Part of the problem is that they all love having the ball, and they need to be more amenable to being the number 2 or 3 options. But, of course, the main issue is that Los Angeles has been unable to keep George and Leonard on the floor simultaneously. It seems at least one of them has been perennially injured. Meanwhile, the Raptors' core has 2 massive advantages over its Clippers equivalents. They are more giving and able to support Kawhi. No question Kawhi was number 1 in Toronto, and the hungry and mostly young players surrounding him were more than happy to defer and provide Leonard with the support he needed. Just as importantly, they managed to stay on the court. On every level, Toronto was just a better fit. Therefore, on paper, at least, the Toronto Raptors would have been better in the early 2020s than in their championship season. Why it may not have mattered where Kawhi plays. But there are counterarguments. The Raptors' title season was great fun to watch. But they weren't the most dominant championship-winning team we have ever seen. They struggled to beat the Bucks and arguably would have lost to the Warriors if Durant hadn't injured his Achilles tendon. So, even an improved Toronto may not have been able to beat the Lakers, Warriors, and Bucks. But the most significant counter-argument is Kawhi's continued injury problems. The star always tended to injuries and suffered a right quadriceps injury with the Spurs that concerned the Raptors enough for them to start a load management regime for Leonard. He only played 60 out of 82 games in Canada. Things only got worse with the Clippers. Kawhi played 57 games out of 72 in the shortened 2019-2020 season, fewer still in 2021, and missed the entire 2021-22 season due to an ACL injury. There is no reason to believe Leonard's health would have held up better in Toronto. As we all know by now, Kawhi is injury-prone, which has limited his utility. Sad but true, and nothing to do with where he is playing. And the Raptors were even more dependent on Leonard than Los Angeles, who have a second superstar. So, while Toronto may have had deeper runs into the playoffs with Leonard than the Clippers did, ultimately, health has been the real problem, not the team.